Hello and welcome back to the podcast. It's been a little while, but I wanted to connect back with a previous guest and do some exploration. And so I have reached out to Richmond Heath. Richmond, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Bryn. Great to be back in touch with you.
Yeah. So those who may or may not remember, Richmond and I spoke before. It was episode 103, so it's a couple of years. It's pre-COVID days. And Richmond is the godfather of tremoring here in in Australia in total. That's a pretty fair assumption, isn't it?
Oh, it's a big title to live up to. The
Godfather.
Yeah, it puts quite a spiritual, dimension to it as well, which is quite nice, actually.
So I guess just for those who may have not encountered TRE, Trauma Release Exercise Tremoring, and this will take a flavour of the conversation today, is I'll have a crack at explaining it.
Right.
Because Richmond's had a go at it before, but part of today is exploring my experience with tremoring over the past 3 years. And so the way I like to describe it to people is there's a couple of ways. One is technically is voluntarily bringing on involuntary tremors into your body, which is technically correct. But the best way I like to describe it is it's allowing the body to flush out the tension and the stress that we have picked up and carry over years and years of doing life. And so I often point towards dogs, who most people have had an experience where a dog has been startled and you look around and they're still shaking or it looks like shivering, but and what they're actively doing is releasing the fight and flight response from their body and softening their muscles and their fascia and their tendons and all of that. And I point out that we as humans work in exactly the same way, but we seldom create the space or have the tools to do that. And so what tremoring is about is allowing the body to release that. And I think the most important part in that is allowing the body. It's not necessarily, for me, the mind say doing a thing. It's allowing the body. And I think, I want to come into that a bit later. So is that a fair description?
Oh, I think that's a brilliant description, Bryn. You should be teaching it, not just doing podcasts about it.
Or maybe we'll have a chat about that later.
Yeah, no, look, I do. I think it's a great description, and you picked up on some really good things, which is in TRE we use the term follow the body, which means that what we're looking to do is to let the body guide the process, because our human organism has got millions of years of evolution in terms of innate knowledge in how to recover from trauma, release stress, optimize its well-being, create better movement patterns, all the different things. So it's exactly what you're saying. Our job is kind of to get out of the way and let the body, lead. Just give it space to actually recover, because we're kind of inhibited in our culture, like you say, with animals don't think, oh, is this a symptom of shock or anxiety or PTSD? They just tremor. And the same with little kids. They let themselves tremor, but I'd also add, they let themselves laugh and cry and move and express fully. So probably the only addition I would have is it's not always about shaking and tremoring. It can be any sort of spontaneous movement that happens. Someone cries, their face curls down, tears come out, or sometimes people lie on the ground and they're doing TRE and they're just getting gurgling in their digestive system. They're just, oh, wow, they might do a few farts, they might burp. So it's just giving the body that space to do whatever it needs to do to sort of unwind itself, but also to reorganize itself to a sort of more happy, healthy, balanced state.
And what I wanted to do today was if people want to know your background and your story of how you got into tremoring, they can easily go back to episode 103 and listen to that. And there's some great stuff in there. I particularly love the part in your story about when you went on the Vipassana retreat, and you're supposed to be sitting there being quiet, and then all of a sudden your body's doing this movement and you're doing handstands and you can't help it, and all of that stuff. And it's really cool to listen to. But what I thought would be good today is actually we explored my experience. I've been tremoring now for 3 years. She's coming up to 3 years since I was first introduced to it. And one of the ways I describe it now is it's in my quiver of secret weapons for doing life. This is one of the go-to arrows of secret weapons that I have in the quiver. And that might sound like a big statement, but for me, it really has. At some levels, it's been a cheat to doing life. I say that it's often when I compare myself to others and what's going on around and my capacity to be present and be in it. But the journey has been not straightforward. And sometimes there's a lot of language that's missing around it. And there's not that many people to be able to talk to about it, because after a period of time, as I'll explain, for me, it starts off at quite a gross level and then becomes subtle to very subtle to super fine. Some of the experiencing that I have now started to become aware of. And so part of what I wanted to do was talk through this with you, Richmond, who obviously have a wealth of experience of this, for me to try and make sense of some of my journey. But then also in doing that and recording this is be an invitation to anybody who's not done tremoring before to come into it, and be anybody who has done for a period of time to actually make sense of the journey that they're embarking upon.
Yeah, I love the analogy. It's like a golden arrow, the go-to, and I totally relate, Bryn. Like for me, up until I learnt TRE or came into the contact with spontaneous tremoring through Vipassana was my original experience, and then TRE gave me a framework and a model to make sense of it. But up until that point, I didn't really have any way of releasing tension and pent-up, energy in myself, apart from they were all unhealthy ways, so they were compulsive eating or drinking or whatever. Or I also have a history of like body-focused BFRBs, body-focused repetitive behaviors, where I pick skin or, pick little picks and that sort of thing. And then the only other one, I can't remember whether we mentioned this in the other episode, was around, sex or orgasm or ejaculation was the only thing I could do that was sort of a little bit physically healthier, but, very draining and exhausting. So finding that my body had a way that it could release tension and relax beyond how I could do it consciously, that was like, it was like opening the door of the jail cell in a way. All of a sudden there was this relief. That was the biggest thing for me. It was about relief. I was like, oh my God, I found a way of finding some relief. That was the beginning.
Yeah.
And then what I love about what you're framing is a lot of us come to TRE or any sort of modality looking for relief or treatment or a fix or a solution, or we just want to feel calm. And we often experience that because immediately when your nervous system starts to balance, you go back towards homeostasis, you just feel calm and relaxed sort of instantly. But what you're talking about, what's really fascinating, and this is what drives me a lot around it, is then we start to recognize that it's not just a tool to make ourselves feel calmer, but it's actually a process of healing, reorganization, and growth. And what I like to term is like neurophysiological growth. Our nervous system is actually maturing and becoming more efficient and organized. And so that's where this journey, it's not a linear journey. It's not just like a restorative model, like our medical model says, I've got a pain, give me something or do something so I can keep being the same person, but without that pain.
Yeah.
And so what the tremoring does is it starts to take us into our authentic self. And a lot of us think, oh, well, authentic self, that means, me when I'm perfectly calm and relaxed and on flow. And I go, yeah, well, that's kind of a theoretical authentic self. But before that, there's the authentic self, which for me is like highly frustrated or nervous or anxious or overwhelmed or immobilized or rigid. And we all want to go from who we are now to who we'd like to be. And we often struggle to go, hang on, in order to heal, we need to be embodied, make that connection, and we need to become authentic in our wounds and our reactivity and our suffering and our all of that stuff in order to then move through that. And, that becomes like the transform that, or to, that becomes the goal that we have to move through So some people do TRE, or they don't do TRE, they avoid TRE, or they forget TRE, partly because your body is determining where you're led on this journey, whereas most of the other stuff we do in the world, we consciously choose from our ego or our will. And so, of course, we only ever choose what we like and what feels good, largely. So this is where the body leads, and then all of a sudden,
cognitive framework.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, we're going, wow, my body wants to go here, because our organism, like all organisms, have a biological imperative to optimize themselves and their well-being. But often our ego or our mind says, but I don't want to go there because it's uncomfortable. That's why it's all been in the body. So I'm really excited to be talking about this with you. And and fascinated to hear for you. Like 3 years is a long period of tremoring, and you're getting this, you're getting this experience. So it's great to hear what you're experiencing and how you're making sense of it, because I can put a neuroscientific bent on it, or I can give you my perspective. But ultimately, and this is, one of the real gifts about TRE is it's kind of got a level of neutrality. Is we use science to explain what we're doing, and it's a trauma recovery, blah, blah. But ultimately, at the end of the day, every human on the planet has got this mechanism inside them. So it doesn't matter what your religion or your culture or your belief system. Ultimately, it's about how does the person make sense of it and integrate it into their own belief system, so it makes sense, and they can go, right, this is a journey worth going on.
Yeah. So it's probably worth placing me at the start of the journey. So the way I was introduced to tremoring was out of the blue. A lovely lady called Fran Fuller, who's an instructor here in Western Australia, had seen what I've been doing with the podcast and just wanted to invite me along to a 4-week training session. And to start with, the first thing that hooked me was, as soon as somebody says, do you want to come on a learning journey? I'm in always, because I'm that type of guy. But when she started to explain it to me, I think there was something even at that cognitive level that hooked me, that suddenly went, hang on a minute. Yeah. Nervous system, downregulate, a tool. Yes, I'm up for this. But if we just come out of that at this point, I was thinking about this before we had this conversation of, so where was I actually at that point in time? And there's possibly 2 ways of looking at that. Where did I think I was? And where do I see that I was now that I'm here 3 years on?
Well, now that you're looking back, isn't that that is so significant? Yep.
And I thought it was a really significant point, because at the time I was probably a product of our society, our Western industrialized, educated, rational society. Was it weird? An acronym, can't remember the, and so I was very much in my head. I'm a smart guy. I have university degrees. I read books. I can hold cognitive models in my head. I was doing a podcast. I was talking to great people. So I thought it was good. I thought it was really good. I thought I got a handle on life. I understood what life was about. I think already at that point, interestingly, at that point, I already understood that my body needed something, because I had played rugby, and then I'd moved from rugby into endurance sports in the UK doing triathlons, and then I'd come to Western Australia, and I had multiple swims to Rottnest in teams and duos, and then I went and swam a solo 6 years ago. And then did another duo with my fiance, and by the end of that, my body was just, I'd swum myself board with swimming, but it was deeper than that. My body wasn't quite doing, I couldn't get it to do the things that had made me feel really great before. I'd achieved these awesome things, and played great rugby, gone further than I ever could, like cycling or running or things like this, and done these impressive things and taken myself on a journey. But the body was just like, there was a sense inside of it. It's like, fucking time out, Bryn. Like, we need something else. And so already my exercise and my just sort of vitality was starting to just come down, and there was not a lot I could do about it. There was not a lot I could do about it. I think at that point I had found the modus movement gym here in Myrie, which started to open me up to new ways of looking at my body and patterns of movement and things like that. So there was the start of something. But at the point when Fran rang me, I was aware of meditation, right? At the end of most movement classes, we do stillness, right? And but it was all still very contained within frameworks that I was cognitively aware of. If I look back now to where I was, man, I was carrying a fuck ton of anxiety, and I didn't know. I was carrying so much anxiety. I was very hypervigilant.
Yeah.
One of the things I've begun to realize is that hypervigilance was actually helping me to be very dependable and reliable at work.
Yeah.
Which was then being remunerated accordingly.
Yeah.
And so some of the outside indicators were giving me feedback on things that weren't necessarily healthy, but were being rewarded as such by the workplace. You know, I was very fastidious. I'd always make sure, you know, things were on time and this, that, the other, and da, 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 da. But there would be an extra level of hypervigilance to it.
Yeah.
And, you know, there were several other things that were there in the background. I mean, I was halfway through a very long journey through the family court of Western Australia, which, is just an atrocious journey to go through. And I can understand why people end up doing some very strange and wonky things. I don't condone it, but I can understand how people get to the point of doing some very strange and wonky things. And we've had recently with double murder suicide of a chap who killed his kids. When you peel it back further, you see that he was in the family court system for a couple of years and trying to rectify that. I think I was dealing with my own codependency, and my previous relationship that led me into the family court system was very much with that sort of domineering cluster B personality trait, which I'd attracted into my life through my own codependency. And like yourself, I'd got 11 years experience of an English boys boarding school, which trains you up for all sorts of things. And you know, there's a lot of trauma around that. And I'll probably come back to that, particularly the boarding school later on. So there were those bigger things. And just at that point in time, I couldn't see the wood for the trees. I thought cognitively everything was fine, but the anxiety levels were just enormous. You know, it's like carrying the backache and stuff that you don't realize because it's just feather by feather by feather by feather.
That's right. And so that, I mean, when you say all those things, Bryn, you know, there's a few things that stick out. And the big one is we have that saying, I'm carrying this anxiety or I'm carrying this trauma. And the question is, how do we carry it? Is it just thoughts? Is it just behaviors? No, carry it. We literally carry it in the physiology of our body. And that's why, you know, all the sort of groundbreaking trauma books of the last few years are all about the body. You know, the body keeps the score, the body bears the burden, you know, the body remembers. So, you know, that's one element. And then what I loved about what you said is going, at the time, I thought I was going okay. And in a way you were. It's like, I've got a good friend and mentor, Andrew Cram, and he sort of says, you know, like, it's like you build a house and you've built it a certain way and it works, you know, it functions. It might not be the most optimal or that, but it's working. So a lot of people are like, well, if I want to build a double story house that's bigger and better, I might have to rip stuff down and redo the foundations because I need to get a stronger foundation in order to hold a better model or a bigger and better model. So what I love about what you're saying there is it's not until you look back and you can go, now that I look back, I can realize that actually I wasn't doing okay because the parts that were not okay were in my body below the level of my conscious awareness. I mean,
Yes.
all of us sitting here, we've all got tension and bracing in our bodies right here, right now, no matter how good we feel, that we're not yet aware of. And so, again, this is to make it a practical level. One of the things that really has developed strongly for me in the last 3 years doing TRE is, we get people to tremor, they start tremoring, and then I'll say to them, okay, notice, is there anywhere in your body that is bracing and holding and resisting against the tremors and letting go? Now, some people go, yeah, I can feel it. My breath's holding, my shoulders are holding. So I say, great. If that's holding, that's your body letting you know that this is too intense. Literally, it means in tension. There's tension here. Yeah, my legs are flapping around and that's releasing, but part of me is not releasing. So say, great, stop and slide your legs out, have a break. Then you've got other people who go, no, I don't notice anywhere that my body's tense or bracing. And anyone who's experienced it looking at the body will go, well, you can see where it's holding here. And so we say, great, stop and take a little break, take a time out, stop the tremors. And now that you've stopped, notice if anything lets go and relaxes. So what often happens for those people is they take a big breath in, or their body takes a breath. They're not doing it consciously. Their body takes a breath and their chest relaxes, or their arms relax, or their shoulder, and they go, can you feel that relief? And they're like, oh, yeah, I felt that soften then. You say, that's right. So what that was showing us, and again, this is the metaphor of in the body's like a little microcosm for life, is it's only often until we relax and find relief in the body and we experience that then we can say, okay, if that part of your body relaxed while you were tremoring, that meant while you were tremoring before, it was holding, but you weren't yet aware of it.
Yeah.
So people start to, on a practical level, go, okay, I get this concept. I often don't realize how tense I am until I get a moment of relief. And then that helps me recognize that before I didn't know, because, and this is the magic, is when it comes to stress and trauma, it's our body that withdraws awareness from our conscious mind. It's not the other way around. It's not because we go, I'm going to consciously ignore my shoulder or my lower back or my vertebrae 8 to 7, 7, 8, 9, or whatever. It's not a cognitive process. When trauma happens, it's an evolutionary process in the nervous system. To keep it really simple, it's more complex and better and broader than that. But that's one of the things. So in terms of our embodiment and how connected we are to our body, that is in a large part determined by our body in terms of when it's allowing us to become back aware of these parts of the frozen, contained, unresolved, because they were too overwhelming for our psyche or our ego to integrate them and engage with them at the time. So, so I was saying, I'm loving this analogy. Is saying it's not until I look back that I realize where I was, because I wasn't aware of what was happening in my body. The beauty of that then, of course, is to continually open to ourselves to say, so right now I feel heaps better than I was.
Yes.
But I know that in my body, below the level of what, my cognition's only aware of, 1% of my subconscious physiology, that my body is aware of it in itself. And then there's the bigger picture. So it's a continual calling back to just let's keep diving into the body, which is really no more than saying the opposite in a way. Is like, let's just give the body time and space, because 99% of our life, we're doing it with our cognition and our ego and our will. And that's all great. So we're just saying, let's try and get some balance and get out of the way and let the body unwind itself, but also show us where we need to go in order to grow.
Absolutely. And I think it's that recognition of that point, that if that's where I was then, and I can now see it with greater clarity, then there's a brain in 12, 24 months time.
Yeah.
Where I am now with more clarity than I can right now.
Yes, and that for me is one of the most exciting things, because for me with TRE, people come, they go, oh, I just want to get rid of this. I want to get rid of that. I want to get rid of the past. Now, when it was originally called TRE for Trauma Release Exercises, that's where David Baselli was working in trauma zones, war zones and natural disasters. So people were going, I'm trying to recover from this immediate recent incident. So that's great. We want to let go of the past. But at the same time, to keep it in balance, there's excitement about, hang on, so it's not just about letting go of the past, it's about growing into the future, because what a lot of people don't know is that when we are in utero, so when we're babies in utero, the way that our nervous system and eventually our cognition and our brain, the way that it integrates the body and the brain is through spontaneous shaking and tremoring in utero. Now, that's got nothing to do with letting go of the past. That's a process of the nervous system and the organism organizing itself, deepening its connections to itself so that it can become more organizationally, efficient and evolved. So the magic for me is when people don't just go, oh, I know how TRE is helping me let go of the past. But like you're saying, you're going, hang on, this process is helping me move into the future.
Yes.
And once there's a sense of going, okay, this is helping me grow and evolve and become more of who I am, even though it might be a difficult journey at times.
Yeah.
Once you know that's the direction that it's taking you, then it's inevitable that you're just going to keep using it. And it's inevitable that you can't do anything else apart from to heal and grow and mature, again, through, not around, not over, not avoiding, but through the physiology of the body. So at the end of the day, our physiology becomes more grounded, more centered, more relaxed. And on that journey, we often become more aware of how ungrounded, unrelaxed. And it's like yin and yang. We're always, parts of us are more safe, parts of us are more unsafe, parts of us are more grounded, parts are still yet to be grounded. And it's the body that's leading that journey.
Yes.
And we come along with it. Now, everything we do, our other cognitive techniques, mindfulness, talk therapy, psychotherapy, exercise, those are all wonderful parts of the journey. And yet there's this bottom-up element that when we let the body lead it, it's got an innate biological imperative to evolve and become more efficient, to become less tense, to become, the optimum, get into the optimum state it can. So anyway, I'm ranting a bit, but what I'm trying to say is the thing that excites me, right, Bryn, and what I love talking to you about is when people get the direction this is taking us.
Yes.
Not just what was the effect, I got rid of something I didn't want, but going, this is a process which is helping me mature, grow, and evolve, which means it's a process helping you to grow and evolve, which means if more people are using it and letting their body, it's a process of allowing our bodies to help us all grow, mature, heal, and evolve. And that becomes an incredibly inspiring and exciting concept when you realize that this is happening on a global level.
100%.
And it's spreading in the same way that as your individual body, the more you let it organize itself or tremor, you see that it's getting more efficient, more relaxed, more organized, more connected. On a global level, the same thing is happening as humans through TRE and other spontaneous movement practices. But there is again, it's like a tremor in the human culture, whereas this spreads organically, bottom up from the grassroots. As a collective, it's also helping us to mature and evolve. And all I do want to say here really clearly is from a Western perspective, because there are a lot of Indigenous cultures that, from a Western perspective say, oh, they haven't got the same development and that. But actually, in terms of maturing human beings and growing and evolving, the maturity and physiological maturity, they're often miles and miles ahead. So I'm talking from, my own sort of Western white male perspective. There's a huge, again, this is what really inspires me, is about not so much about how it benefits me, although that's important, but the potential for, or not even the potential, the direction that this tremoring process, whether invoked through TRE or Seiki Jutsu or Katsujin Undo or shaking medicine or bioenergetics, it's an organic arising out of our bodies, which is helping to grow and evolve. It's incredibly profound to get a sense of that direction, like you're saying. So, it's like you can see that I am becoming a better Bryn in the future, and it's just going to keep going. So let's get on board and make that as good as possible.
So some of the immediate experiences that I had right in that 4-week course were actual experiences of a lot of what you've just mentioned. The very first week that we went to, and my fiance Lucy came with me as well. I was just starting to tremor in the hips, and then all of a sudden there was just something went and left me. The most interesting thing about that was I was like, whoa, something's just gone on, and I got this real startled look on my face. But not only did that occur, but Lucy was looking at me and she just went, I just felt you. And she was like meter and a half away, and she was just like, I just felt you. And then when we got in the car afterwards, we both looked at each other and just floods of tears for no reason that we could explain. And then afterwards, the two of us were like, "This is awesome, isn't it?" Like, you know, there were no words. There was no point in any words at that point. And that's one of the things I try to explain to people who are interested in it is there's no point in any words because you have to just go experience it. So at that point, to be honest, Richmond, I was something was definitely there. I was experientially hooked, and I was like, right, I'm giving this a crack. The second thing that happened was, and I think it was in the third or the fourth of the week that I left one of the courses, the training sessions, and I felt really like,
grumpy.
Yeah, just a bit weird, just a bit lower energy than when I'd gone in.
Yeah,
and it was really freaky, and so I had to ring Fran up and say, you know, it was awesome week one. You know, I got a massive release, I'm crying in the car, and this week I'm like, oh, what's the sure? And one of the things she explained to me was there were many people that were in that course had turned up with some very heavy and present trauma, much of which, you know, we're not talking about because we don't have to talk about, so we don't have to re-traumatize ourselves. And in the process of us being in a room and beginning to tremor and release, there were some who were possibly, I don't know, how do I describe? I don't want to say like high vibration or any wanky shit like that, but it was like, so you know, it sounded like bloody South Fremantle spiritual. But there were some of us who were sort of in a lighter place in our
body's moving easier. Yep.
Yeah, and there were those that weren't, and so there was almost like this business, which at the start with I felt as me coming down, but Fran had explained to me that a lot of other people had left it and gone, oh, I felt brilliant like that. So there was this leveling out. So I got this real experiential experience of not just with one-on-one Lucy feeling my release, but then me feeling the whole group. And that was hugely profound, because although I didn't enjoy that experience, that was actually going to be the doorway into quite a lot of stuff that was about to happen. It then made me start to think, well, you know, without seeming egotistical, if I've been here and these people have been there and we've done this is okay, I've come down a little bit, but collectively we're all net positive for some of the work that I've been doing already. You know, and that got me thinking about how groups are communicating with one another beyond just talking, and from nervous system point of view.
Totally. And so I mean, we sort of go, oh, is it all woo-woo and it's all energetic and all that sort of stuff? But if you look at the neuroscience of collective flow states, where, you know, how do organisms resonate together? You know, that's exactly, you're having an experience of going, oh, okay, I can empathize and connect and resonate with a group of people. And anyone who's ever played a team sport, or, you know, jazz musicians, they get in the groove, or, you know, in the pocket, or you're in the zone. And you can have that experience on your own, but when you have it in a group, it's a bit like singing in a group. You know, if you sing on your own, sounds great. You sing in a choir, all of a sudden you can create resonance and harmonies that you can't create singularly. And so just yesterday, Bryn, I did a session with some elite volleyballers at a centre of excellence in Melbourne that I've been working with on and off in their program for 5 years. And this was amazing. So we couldn't get a room to do the session in, so we were on the volleyball court or a basketball court, and next door was an elite female basketball team who are training. Now, in a setting like that, you know, you've got all the squeaks of the bloody runners on the thing. It's high pitch. You've got people squealing and shouting. Like, it is a pretty intensive environment. So we did this session with these guys. It was about, I don't know, 18 or something. And some of them had done it last year with me, and they were using the tremoring, and a lot of them were new. And they were having amazing releases, and, oh, my body feels a bit more relaxed. I'm a bit more relaxed. But the thing that stands out for me is when they all got back up, or even when they were tremoring, I kept saying to one of the coaches, and I'm saying, are you noticing how peaceful and calm all these people are? And this court is, there's a massive crazy game going on just 10 meters away, and they're all chilled out and relaxed. And then at the end, they got up and they were standing around, and all I could describe it was like again, I don't want to sound woo, the energy in the room, but it was like there was just this softness and this peacefulness. And they're all standing there. And the coach afterwards, I said, did you notice that? That's this group flow where people start to resonate. We come out of our defenses. We're more open and connected. And he said, oh, yeah, that was amazing. He said, those guys can't normally stand there and concentrate like that. I knew something, I knew what was happening, because normally they'd be fidgeting or they'd be distracted. And so then from that place, and I'm going back in a couple of weeks, and I can't wait, because I said, well, next time what we're going to do, because they're going to play a scratch match and they'll divide into two half teams. And so we're going to get the two teams to tremor separately at either ends of the court, so that they have an experience of, right, now when you get up off the floor, can you feel how more open and calm and engaged? And it's not a conscious process. It's not saying I'm paying more cognitive attention, I'm being more mindful of my teammates. It's that our nervous systems, again, for want of a better word, our organisms, our bodies, start to sense on that subconscious level, and people can feel that collective flow. And again, for people working in teams, whether it's at work or schools, if you can get teachers in the schools tremoring together and students, there becomes this collective energy. There's just so much great potential. And of course, it has much bigger impacts than just thinking, oh, okay, this is good for me. I'm an individual. Again, that very Western individualistic. I want to feel good. This is good. Yeah, well, if the group helps me, great. But it helps us to get that sense that we often miss in the West, that, hang on, we are part of a bigger community, and how we show up in that community has an impact on others, the same person. But together, when we're moving into, healing and working and connecting together, we can achieve more and be happier and healthier. And again, same as in the physical body, we can be more efficient and effective and healed and mature and evolved as a community, or as a corporation, or as a culture, or as in, as a global human culture, where we're gradually learning, how do we all get along in the same way that, my liver's got to work out how it relates to my lungs, and my lungs have got to relate to how it relates to my left ear. And as our organism grows in utero, it's forming these connections and relationships that become more healthy and functional. And again, so on a global level, there's the group flow where you're saying, hey, I'm feeling that individual group in that room. And again, if we keep sort of taking it out on a fractal level, that is, what I'm so excited about and so passionate about and dedicated to on a global level, because I see the exact same process happening as more people are allowing this impulse to arise, and more organizations and more countries, that in the same way that our body has the same pattern of trying to optimize its well-being, the human culture has that as well at a sort of organismic level, as long as we surrender and allow ourselves to get into it. Now, again, a lot of traditional cultures would be sitting there going, duh, of course, this is what we've been trying to tell you for 20 years, or 200 years, I should say. And so, but again, there's this sort of expanding concentric circles of going, yeah, great. And now we're a global culture. How do we actually integrate? So again, this is it's just an amazing impulse for individual well-being, but also for, collective harmony and, connect harmony and joy, like not just going, yeah, we're getting along, we're not fighting, but actually, wow, we're feeling more alive. So I'm interested in, when you had that moment with Lucy where you're like, oh, something's changed, something's left, I'm more there. What does that mean for you, your life, your partner, your relationship? Like, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty profound and it was really quite intimate as well. I guess at that point in time, and this is the thing, on one level, here we are, two of us talking about all this, but it is actually getting in and practicing and doing and experiencing, and that means you then build this experiential knowledge, which, you know, I don't. You could try and write it in a book and read it, but that doesn't mean that you've done it.
That means you understand it. Again, you understand it cognitively.
You've got a frame of reference to make sense with it. But yeah, I mean, quite quickly after the course, like I said, I was experientially hooked. Not long after the end of the class, after the end of the 4-week course, I actually sat down one day very quietly and made a deal with my body. And I just basically said, right, whatever you need to do, we're going to do. And I recognize now that you need to do what you need to do. And so we're going to go on this journey. And that was quite a roller coaster of a decision to, acknowledgement or whatever deal to make with my body, because over the next, 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 weeks, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and just would be doing stuff. And it was almost like my body would be saying to me, well, you said this is what we're going to do, so this is what we're going to do. And so it was really quite intense. But one of the things I started to notice quite quickly was two things. One was that when I was getting jacked up from a particular experience, like when you have a confrontation or something like that, and it winds you up or something like that, I had a tool that I could immediately go to try and downregulate. So it's in the moment, really good. Yeah, fine. But then there was also this progressive work of doing it even when you haven't just encountered an experience that's jacked you up. And the way I was looking at it was I was downregulating the sort of default level that my nervous system was operating at. And it was coming down little bit by little bit by little bit by little bit. And that wasn't happening overnight, but it was certainly little bit by little bit. And then all of a sudden I could feel my way into, particularly in the workplace, why people were making certain decisions. And the best way to explain this is, I can give you the example of little child goes up the climbing frame to, and goes that bit higher, that then triggers the mother's nervous system. So what does the mother do? Tells the child to come down. Now, if we look at the dynamics of that interaction, what she's actually done is she's forced other people and the outside world to change, to assuage her nervous system, rather than her have a chat with herself and be in her nervous system and do something to downregulate that. So at that point in time, what came across to me was her nervous system had then taken over her decision-making process. So she was now making a decision to downregulate her own nervous system by controlling the outside environment, right? You now take that, the dynamics of those things that I've just felt, I've explained, but I was beginning to feel.
Yeah.
I'm in the workplace and people are asking me to do certain things. And I'm sitting there going, can you explain why? And he goes, well, we need to mitigate that risk. And I'm like, well, no, because I could feel that when I was being told we need to mitigate that risk, it's what we're actually saying is we need to feel less anxious and feel a whole lot better about this. So we need you, Bryn, to go and do this certain action. Yeah. Now, that, if I'm going to be blunt, is not a good deployment of time, money, and resources to get people to do stuff, because people in a slightly more leadership role can't handle their nervous system or the level that it's firing up. And so they're being captured by their nervous system, and they're not still in a place that's open to possibility and probability and allowing solutions to emerge. And I started to feel my way into this while I was at work. And it actually made me quite unpopular because I refused to do a number of things. And I was in danger of getting myself sacked at one point. But it was like, well, if I just go and do this, then I'm feeding the fire of this behavior, which is you need to move the blocks around in the outside world to make you feel better inside.
Yeah.
And you know, it was so difficult because I could feel it. Could just about articulate it, but I wasn't in a place where I could properly hold my ground, articulate and what have you. But I knew that I had to go with this experience. So that got me in a bit of trouble where I'm saying to people, I'm just not going to do that.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's not a good deployment of time, money, and resources. Why do you say that? Because we're just mitigating, but I couldn't properly. And if I tried to go into explaining that, well, that's because your nervous system's jacked up and stuff like that, they're going to look at me and go, you're being a fucking weirdo now, really. Yeah. So it really wasn't. Once I embarked on the journey, it was actually quite difficult to start with, because now all of a sudden I'm not just feeling me, I'm feeling other people, where decisions are coming from, where demands upon me are coming from. And that was really quite taxing, because at the same time I was going deeper and deeper and deeper into myself, and at the same time I was having experiences whereby I could tremor, and it was still quite a gross level of movement. I could tremor and lie on the carpet in the front room here, and I'd tremor for like 10-15 minutes, and then all of a sudden there would be this calmness, and there would just be this beautiful serene calmness, which I don't know, the closest thing you can explain to is that post-coital and I was just lying there and like nothing was going on in the body, it was just calm. And then outside I would hear something like a door close or something like that, and I could feel what I refer to as microtraumas of just sound of life, right? And I could feel that. I was like, oh my God, this shit's going on all the time in my body. These little microtraumas of just being in life, sound and vibration and cars and driving and things of these nature are causing me these what felt like microtraumas at the time. So once I'd got to that sort of more subtle level and I'm feeling these things coming in, that perception was quite taxing, let alone having to deal with the outside world that I was then beginning to feel. And it meant that for a period of time I just wanted, I was like, I need to retreat away from all of this. But at the same time, there was never a point where I thought I need to stop tremoring, I need to back off. Because there was something that was still taking me into this, and I knew that it was going somewhere. I think after what became super interesting was after a year of tremoring, I rang Fran up and said, can we have a tremor check-in, please? It seemed like a clever thing to do. I think I'd phoned you up once. That was funny. The first time I tremored on my front and not on my back, and then the next thing I was almost like dry humping the ground, and I had to phone you up and go, do you ever get like these funky, hot, sexy feelings while you do this? I remember you going, oh, you had your first stiffy, like, and that was hilarious. But then I had a check-in with Fran, and what we realized was I was almost coming to I was doing these massive gross movements in my body. If you saw me, you'd thought I'd got, I was on rave drugs or something. And what she started to point me towards was slightly more subtle tremoring in smaller areas of my body. And so then all of a sudden that was particularly interesting, because now I was going into more finer parts. It was like I tremored the outside shell, and now we were going into more of the finer muscles, and that became amazing as well. I mean, I remember not long after that driving to work one day, and I had to pull over in the car, and because by this point, if I feel a tremor coming on, as long as it's safe, I'll let it go. there's no point pushing it away. I'd made that deal with my body a year before, like, when we need to do stuff, we're going to do stuff. And irrespective of where we are, we can always find a place to go and train, whether it's the toilet or whatever. I was driving along, and all of a sudden I had to pull over the car because my whole face just wanted to screw up, and I couldn't actually open my eyes. And that was followed by a jaw tremor a couple of days later. And those again felt, afterwards, I was left in this almost crying state because it released stuff at such a subtle level. I mean, the muscles around the face are really subtle, but they're always on, they're always moving, and so it was just scrunched up. And yet after those, again, I was just floods of tears. Tears have been a frequent thing, and I quite enjoy crying now, uncontrollably sobbing some days. And yeah, but it was becoming more and more and more subtle. As this was happening, I was starting to becoming more and more subtle in the perception of the outside world, which, to be honest, again, was taking another level of existential load. It was becoming harder at times. And so there were moments when, like I said, I just want to retreat from the outside world. I don't want to deal with you all. You're all just too fucking taxing on me and my entity and my body. I feel how, and it was at that point I can understand why people just want to retreat and go on like a 4-week retreat to a Buddhist monastery where you don't talk about anything, you don't deal with anybody, you shut the outside world out. But another experience that started to happen was, I think it was right at the start of 2020, and this is just pre-COVID. My parents were over, and I was at the business end. I was getting towards the business end of dealing with the family court and my former partner and stuff like that. And I was supposed to go into court the next day, and there was going to be a bit of a showdown, et cetera, et cetera. And so, that brings with it a huge level of anxiety. And something, I can't remember what had occurred, but something had happened. I received a letter from their lawyer, and and it was all wonking around and this, that, and the other. And my mum and dad were over from England, and dad was, trying to be sportive and etc. And I was at their place, and this thing had happened. And then just the impact of it all hit me, and I lost my shit. I was angry, I was shouty, I was teary, I was this, that, and the other. And at that point, that's where the old man wanted to give me the old Winston Churchill, cometh the hour, cometh the man, come on, let's keep it together type thing. And that's where I had to go. And I remember it clearly. I just went, no, Dad, I don't do compartmentalization anymore. This is me. This is like, I will lose my shit right now, but my shit will come back as soon as this has been purged, and I allowed myself to feel the anxiety, the anger, and everything that was occurring in that moment. And I knew that that's what I had to do, because then I could let that go. And then once that had gone, and it only took half an hour or so, I was then back into a place where I was able to make proactive decisions and open up to possibility and probability. And I'd noticed, particularly in the year before that more and more I was starting to become quite cleanly angry, instead of this dull, munted, shitty male anger thing that we do. Because I used to run on the code that men plus anger equals destruction, equals violence, equals harm and hurt for others. And so I used to try and avoid it, and I would be that sort of simmering anger. Are you angry? No. And then you'd blow your lid every now and again, and then you'd feel a bit better, and you have to say sorry to a lot of people. Whereas in this, I was finding, leading up to this, I was finding myself just getting cleanly angry. If somebody transcended my border boundaries, they fucking knew about it really quickly. But at the same time, they did know about it. And I would come back down again quite quickly, and we could have that dialogue, and people knew where they stood with me a lot more, which made life way more straightforward. And for me, means I wasn't carrying around this continually growing, simmering load of anger that was not being dealt with. So when I had this court experience, I stood there in front of my parents and went, Dad, I don't do compartmentalization anymore. I just leave me to feel this. And I said, and in a minute, not long, I'll be good as gold. And lo and behold, I was. And my mum, bless her, looked at the old man and went, you learn a lot from Bryn. But that was a real in life's crucible. All of a sudden, I started to feel something different occurring, which was, I am actually in it, and I am actually feeling things all the time. And in that moment, I had this incredible sense of existential trust in myself, that it was okay to lose my shit, because the essence of me wasn't going to be lost, and that my shit, as it were, would come back to me.
Can I just, like, I just have to jump in here. What you just said was existential trust. Is that a term you've heard before, you've read before? Have you just said that now?
No. I talk about existential trust, and as a result of tremoring and other things as well that I put in, but tremoring being a central thing, I feel that I can carry a greater existential load nowadays.
So, because I just wanted, I mean, again, like, you've got all these wonderful experiences and stories, but for me, when you said that, it's not a term I've heard before. It's not a concept I've heard anyone talk about before. I know everything about, existential angst or, uncertainty or whatever, that deep core. It's such a solid anchoring thing. If you were to say to people, what would it be like if at the core of your being you had I can't say the word, but existential trust, rather than living in a permanent state of existential fear and anxiety or anger or overwhelm, that. And so again, for me, I hear your journey. It's like we get these glimpses or these brief experiences of what does it feel like when I'm really just in the moment. I'm not reacting to the past that's playing out through my body, even though it's not happening now. I'm not so focused on trying to get to the future, so it's better than which the magic's in the moment. And so again, for me, if I can share my experience,
for sure,
my model of that. I've actually I did a drawing and a poem. So I remember doing a tremor with David Berselli, one of the times when he'd come out, and for years he'd be trying to work on me to get my body to loosen up and get, because I tend to have a very rigid body and very held. When my mind's in the way, when I did Vipassana, I took my mind out, my body was infinitely, extremely extraordinary. But anyway, so my whole organism, he'd spent years trying to jump on me and push and prod, and at the end, I remember one day he's half laughing. He said, "You just need to smoke some dope because I can't do anything that make your body, relax." And it was more about my mind and that presence. But I remember one time I think I was lying maybe on my chest, and he was pushing on my back, and he was trying to get my back to soften. And he started pushing on my back, and I was like, "No, David, that's too hard. I can feel my chest bracing against your pushing in." And I even remember saying, I said, "David, you could drive a car over that chest. I can feel it's not going to let go. You're not going to be able to push it down." I said, "Just make your hand a bit lighter." And so he took a bit of pressure off, and I was like, I felt myself soften. I said, no, take less pressure. So he ended up just having his hand resting there. So there was no trying to push in or it was just attuning and meeting my body.
Yeah.
And as soon as that happened, I just felt myself just start to soften and warmth, and my body relaxed. It was just relaxing. It wasn't shaking. It wasn't tremoring. It was just melting, for want of a better word. And then at that time, so I had this experience of, all I can say is have this experience of feeling the ground beneath my feet or the ground inside me. So at that time, I'd been involved in a men's, the Menergy men's gathering on a committee. And our theme that year was Into the Deep. And so we'd had this analogy that we kept talking about in scuba diving. It's like, when you dive down really deep, you have to decompress on the way back up. Like you have to stop at 5 meters and let the oxygen all reorganize. So there was this very strong sort of narrative or story of this sense of when we dive into the deep, like scuba diving, we have to really take our time to come back out, and it's dangerous. And do you know what? If you dive into the deep and don't come back up, you're going to die. Like that's the scuba sort of water. And so my whole life had this feeling of going, if I stood on the edge of out of the water, on the edge of the ocean, and if the ocean's my body, let's just use it that. If I stayed in my head and I stayed out of my body and I lived like that, I could avoid the ocean. I could avoid all the turbulence and all the waves and getting thrashed around. And so I could stay, we could stay out of our body, just disconnected, this dorsal vagal disconnected state. So we live in our heads. My body's building the bird until it can't keep going. So like you, it's like got to a point of going, I can't keep living like this. I can't do the things that used to make me happy because they don't make me happy, and I physically can't do them anymore. My body's breaking down. So then there was a lot of experiences of, okay, let's dive into the body. This is where we're going. But when we dive into the depths, there's currents and it's bloody murky, and sometimes it's a beautiful, blissful floating day, but others days you're getting smashed against the rocks. And so you've got to get back out, and you've got to come back out of the body, and too much TRE, too much into my body. Let's jump back out, calm down, regulate, take control, into all those sort of things. And in that moment, so that was the analogies. Like, we go into the body, but it can be too much and too far. Jump back out, come back out of the body. And when I was lying on that floor, I had the image of being just surrendering, and it was like a visual image came to mind. And it was like I was drifting further and further down into the bottom and getting darker. There's less light there. It's murkier. It's dangerous. And then all of a sudden, pop, my feet have landed on the bottom of the ocean. And in that moment, I was like, oh my God, this is really calm and solid down here.
Yes.
Further in my body, deeper into my body, there was actually a place that I could connect with now. I'd had the experience of going, I can trust my body deeper into my body, because there's this solidity underneath all that turbulence. And then the analogy started to change for me. Again, this is just making an analogy and making sense. Instead of being someone living on the surface going, I dive into my body, then I have to get back out because it's overwhelming. In those moments, I had this experience of going, wow, I'm on the bottom of the ocean, safe, calm, relaxed. And then every so often I jump upwards into the water and get thrashed around in my body, knowing that when I fully surrender to it, I sink back down and there's some earth underneath me as well.
Yes.
So again, it was just, for me, that was a profound shift. I've got a painting that I did of it. I've got a poem, music about it, because in that moment, that was the moment for me where consciously I had this connection to go, wow, deeper inside my body, body trust, existential trust. If I go far enough in and I let myself connect in there, it's all okay.
Yeah.
And that was a little glimpse. Now, I don't live like that all the time. I will go on, because once you get that glimpse, then we have to go back to the reality of making that real, not just in my mind, knowing that everything's going to be okay, but in my physiology, in my body. Mm-hmm. So that's what, when you share that story, there's that moment of recognizing. And this is what, it's like, I've never had that term for that. I talk about, finding the ground, earth beneath my feet, or the safety within me. David Berceli used to say, trauma's in the body, yeah, but so safety further underneath it.
Yes.
Our organism knows it's safe if right here, unless we're under attack. But so when you said that term, existential trust.
Yes.
For me, that's like a beautiful, concept or thing of going, somewhere at the core of my being, there's a connection to this sense of trust. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to die. Doesn't mean that things aren't going to hurt. Doesn't mean that I'm not go through the, the night and day and the light and dark of all that sort of stuff. But somewhere inside my organism knows that to be true. Not just I know it conceptually, it feels in it. So when the shit hits the fan and the stuff comes up and my mind and my ego is going, this is bullshit. I hate this. I'm in the wrong place. This shouldn't be happening. And sure, we still need to make decisions in life, but there's a deeper part of me that is just always there going, it's okay, calm, it's all right, I know you don't like it, I know you don't understand it, it's all moving in the right direction. And then you get through that next wave, you settle down, you go, oh, I hated that, I wish that never had to happen, but you know what, I feel a bit more calm, a bit more relaxed, a bit more grounded, a bit more open, a bit more real, a bit more present, a bit more creative, a bit more alive, a bit more supportive, a bit more compassionate, a little bit more empathic. And then, of course, the next thing happens, I'm like, oh, my God, who was I kidding, thinking that I was actually calm, relaxed, and grounded, because my next trigger in my physiology gets touched, the next button that's held in the body. But and this comes back to the original thing we were talking about, is when we get that sense of the direction, it's like that the river's flowing us in, you go, this is taking us in the right direction. It just makes it that little bit easier to surrender and float a little bit more, trying to push the river or swim against the river or change the direction of the current.
100%, because from that, it wasn't long afterwards that we started to have, that was early 2020, we started going to COVID times, and there's that in and of itself has been a journey. And I think one of the things that I have found is that we use, some people refer to depression as the black dog, right? And the way I see it now is most people will lock the door as tight as they can from the black dog, and all that's going to happen is the black dog's going to fuck off, get all his mates, come and try and smash that door down. And if you try and fortify it more, he'll go and get more mates, right? And so now it's a matter of the door's always open. The door is always open for the black dog to come. And he comes, he spends some time, and I learn something from it, and there's a reason, and then I leave. And then he leaves. And in that time, I think most people, if we're really honest, have had suicidal thoughts, right? And that in and of itself can be very, very scary, because all of a sudden there's this that goes through here.
Yeah.
Mine involves, and I'll be clear as day. Mine involves taking the surf straps out the back of my high lugs and hanging myself from a tree, right? And there's been moments when the crucible of life has got to that point that they're the doors that have been decided upon. And that's happened, in the last 12, 18 months as well. And the thing is, though, now is because I have this existential trust that this is a passing thing, that I can feel anxious, that I can be depressed at times, that I can have fleeting suicidal thoughts, that it will be all right because I'm here. Now, as you said, it doesn't give me carte blanche to escape the universal truths of the fact that bad things could happen to me. One day I will die. The sun goes down at the end of the day. They're truths. They're the truths of nature. And try as much as you like, you won't escape those. However, there's all the other stuff and that we encounter, and sometimes we do have these responses to that. And I just find today a lot of our response to mental and emotional health challenges is more what I refer to as being neurotic. And neurotic meaning that we all suffer, but to avoid all suffering at all cost, that is where neurosis comes from. That's where we get the word neurotic. And I used to think of resilience being this shield that I would have, which means I could take as many barbs and arrows, and I was still fucking hard enough. But now resilience is that existential trust. And interestingly, on a subsequent check-in with Fran, a year later, so that was the second check-in, I'm actually due another one soon, we started to talk about the fact that being more watery, and a lot of my tremoring was now lying on the side and my back doing this, and that and I sort of resonated with that, because it's not that I have no form, but underneath it, it's not underneath it all, it's throughout it all.
More fluid.
Yeah, it's more fun, but it's throughout me. There is greater existential trust, existential load. And as a result of that, and being able to see deeper into my own mental and emotional health responses, I can now see that most of them are appropriate. Most of them are 100% appropriate to the world that we live in, that have that don't necessarily have life as a central organizing principle in the way that we do things as a society. And so, like a canary bird in the mine shaft, I'm going to feel depressed. I'm going to feel anxious. I'm going to feel like life's not worth much at times, because life, the way the machine, or whatever you want to call it, particularly of economies and things like that, you're seen as a resource. And so if you feel that your life's worthless, it's because the machine treats you as a worthless life, as a bank account, as a number or something like that. And that's okay. That's being alive. That is actually being alive. And that is experiencing things into its fullest. And the more that I can start to do that, the deeper I can see into the outside world, the deeper I see into myself. And I just see this like infinity sign on its side, doing this, getting deeper and deeper. And so now I can begin to handle and hold the contradiction, paradox, and complexity of the world, which again doesn't make living life that easier. Because now what I find is that now I'm operating, we've gone from quite a gross level, and if I track my tremor, my actual physical tremors as they manifest themselves, they went from being very gross level, massive movements, to subtle movements, to now very watery, but still, and that doesn't mean to say that I don't still have gross movements and I don't still have subtle movements. I still do. And I will do, because I am interacting with the world at the same time. But now there's a presence of some very fine stuff. And so the problem I found for a period of time, and that's half the reason why I want to have this conversation, is sometimes if I talk from that level, the best analogy I can say is sometimes I find myself talking French to a Chinese person. The difference is that we're both actually using English, but I'm coming from one place, and that in itself became essentially challenging for a period of time, until I suddenly had to say to myself, well, you need to acknowledge what you've done and where you're at. Nobody wants to put tickets on themselves and go, oh, now look at fucking Brent, isn't he amazing for all this 3 years of tremor work he's done? But it just is what it is. And so this is kind of where I operate from. But I have to recognize that I also have to operate from those previous levels as well, because I'm not going to tremor circles on the beach every morning and talking about tremoring in coffee shops with everybody, because it's not that widespread yet, or this awareness of the role of our nervous system in how we do stuff. And so, particularly as we now find ourselves in the last 2 years has been uncertain, has been traumatic, has been a whole existentially challenging, all the things like the external anchor points that we construct our identity of ourselves, which is again a key part of our existential strength, and the load that we can carry helps us. Many of the external anchor points that we more onto have all been moved over the last 2 years. And so all of a sudden, if you've not actually spent time being aware of your roots in yourself, then when the anchor points from the outside world have moved, all of a sudden you're watching the trees flapping around in the wind, and the tide, I'm putting a lot of nature metaphors all over the place. The tide's going out, the tide has gone out, and it's like, right, well, where are you all at? And and so I find myself in these places where it's not that I'm concerned, not that I'm not concerned about where the world's going and some of the political decisions that have been made, and the drivers that are made behind them, and I still have a reaction to that, but then I move through that reaction, and then I see it within its pattern and what have you. I mean, here in Western Australia, I'll be pretty transparent. In November, when the Premier pulled out the vaccine mandate, I went into 3 weeks of existential dismay with the world. I was like, how the fuck? And there were several other things that had gone on which were lesser for me in my experience, of where people hadn't paid attention to actually what was going on, and then all of a sudden, kapow, something happens, and everybody's getting sucked into the drama of this without realizing the journey that we've been through in time to get to this place. So all of a sudden, everybody's just dealing with this reality because they're in this reality, and it's a drama. So we can deal with the drama, and drama is a really good way to avoid what's actually going on. And so I was suffering from this huge existential dismay, where I'm looking at it going, so hang on a minute, we're mandating vaccines in the workplace. So that means we're just trying to keep the economy going versus actual health imperatives. And I might be being conspiratorial or cynical or something, but that was what was coming out. And I just and the fact that nobody else could see or even go there meant that I felt quite alone. And the fact that we were driven into this, you're either pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine, and there was no discussion point in the middle, that was driving me fucking mental as well. We couldn't have a nuanced discussion about, I'm a bit hesitant about this, or, it was all just smashing in. And so I had to go and consult a good friend, Sean Nano, just to create some space for me to get into this. And what we realized was there was trauma in there about being told what to do. And there was trauma around the concept of my own death. Because what was I worried about here? That I might have inject something that was going to, physically harm me, end my life, So when you drill that down, that's all to do with my own death. There was being told what to do. Everyone's got it's a big sweeping statement, but I back it up. Nearly everybody's got trauma about being told what to do. Yeah. And then the third thing in there was just gracefully accepting my place in the whole pattern of life. That, I am one person. I am one person, but I am also in amongst hundreds and thousands and millions of others who happen to be here in this place at this time, as we move through our, conscious and cultural evolution. And I have to accept where we are as a mass as well. And after that, all of this existential dismay just sort of left me. And I was able to move with more ease and grace in life.
What do you call that? Is that existential acceptance? What's the next word there?
I think probably yeah. It's understanding where I, that I fit. It's not overstating my place in the pattern.
Where you exist, where and how.
Yeah. So it's it's a lot around my my nature, place, and purpose in life. And so that was hugely beneficial. But again, throughout all of that period, where I am seriously just I didn't want to check out of life. There was no suicidal thoughts during that point, but I wanted to check out of life. I wanted to go somewhere else and this, that, and the other. But then you have to come back to the what the traumatic realization is, that you can't.
Yeah.
Because we're all in this together. And no man is an island. And throughout all of that, obviously I was on the tools, I was on the tremoring, and I was going through it. And all of that time, it's interesting, I was back into some gross movements that then became subtle, that then became very subtle. And it was a fascinating time.
So it's it's wonderful to hear the journey you're on. And what's just come to me, just listening to you, and you've got this green pot plant inside behind you. If people are on the podcast audio, they won't see that, but there's a beautiful indoor plant there behind you. So when you look at a plant, you can tell whether the plant, if a plant's thriving and it's really alive, you can see it looks healthy, it looks well, it's growing, it's doing that. When a plant's shriveling, or it's not nourished, and you can see it's wilting, or it's really obvious, isn't it? I mean, everyone knows that. And for me, Bryn, reflecting on listening to you talk and sharing your experience over that time, it's like, and having seen this in my own personal life, but having also watched this and observed this in, countless thousands of other people who keep using this, and this is not me, but other people all around the world, it's like when I'm listening to you and looking at you today, I just go, okay, let's sum up what's happened in the last few years. I go, you're more alive.
Yes.
I mean, that's at the end of it. People say, well, what does tremoring help you do? I say, well, it helps you become more alive. Now, you've got all those struggles and all those things, but if we look at a plant, we go, look, the plant's a bit healthier, it's a bit more alive, it's a bit more. So, that's what I see and hear, but it's just really obvious. Like, it's just, you're more alive, there's more life.
Yeah.
And as you
even
say,
when I'm anxious, even when I'm depressed, even when I'm suffering existential dismay.
Yep, it's not getting out of it. And as I say, it's like the magic's in the moment, and this mystical, the mystery of it's just complete unknown. We've got no idea what we're floating around in bloody space. Apparently, it's just it is so much mystery. And it's not just tremoring. You're doing lots of other things and endless other stuff. But as you say, this is like one of your golden arrows in your quill, which again, totally, I relate. And again, that plant behind you, it's got an innate impulse to make itself as alive as possible. And it's the same with us and our human organism. And in a way, we call it tremoring, but really, we're just doing. Let's just call it life force. We're finding a way, people might call it Kundalini, people might call it the Holy Spirit, people, all different things in different cultures, but there's something inside us which is wanting to, be alive and come alive as freely as we can. And that's kind of what tremoring does. And it helps us go into the full catastrophe of life. I know for me recently, one thing that's really been hitting home, and it's kind of that existential acceptance in that way, is going, I'm really aware of my early lifehood experiences, my early, traumatic experiences, more social trauma, not, things, but just, and my genetic inheritance, my parenting inheritance, all those things of having an effect, and going, you know what, gee, I feel a bit sad that I'm not more empathic or compassionate, or I feel a bit sad that I'm not more social or accurate or helpful or insightful or effective in my treatment, but what was different was there was an acceptance. A few people have been talking about this, so it's, again, we often come to TRE going, oh my God, I'm going to become enlightened and then I'll be happy, and I'm like, a leopard doesn't necessarily change its spots. It's not like we often come to TRE going, I'm going to get rid of all my childhood trauma and then I'll be okay. Versus, I can be okay now, and I'm on this journey, and by following it and using the experiences of life, we start to become more alive. And that for me is what I see. It's wonderful and exciting. You've got this deep sense of connecting with a sense of existential safety or trust, you call it, using it. But at the same time, well, great, let's all just sit around on the couch and say, oh, I'm trusting. It's a bit, life's boring. There's a sense of a lot, this existential life or aliveness or, the movement. And it's not something we have to do. It's not something we have to kind of make happen, although we're still involved in it. We make choices and we do that. But there's just, it's like in the current of life. And naturally through that process, you're more alive.
Yeah. 100%.
It's magic.
Remarkably more a conduit for life.
Yeah.
And I see my place in life, the pattern of life, clearer now, rather than just being some, little island lost all by itself. And one of you mentioned enlightenment, and I warned you there was a question.
Oh,
that I
yeah.
throw out.
Yep.
This came to me the other day, is enlightenment a function of the nervous system?
Well, the answer, of course, is yes.
Yeah.
A function, is it correlated with an embodied state of yes, in my opinion?
Yeah.
So
one, often,
or hang on, can I re-answer that? Probably,
yeah.
because I don't know. I wouldn't call myself enlightened. So when I'm enlightened, I'll let you know, and I'll say this is how my nervous system is, and then I'll be able to give you an accurate answer.
Well, right, when you get the badge. Yeah, because traditionally, like, my schema of the knowledge of the word enlightenment would come from Buddhism, which then I have pictures of the Buddha sitting under the tree for X amount of days and then gaining enlightenment, this, that, and the other. And so one of the most interesting things, and I'll put a link to it in this with this podcast, is you talked in a video about high anxiety functioning and
high functioning anxiety. Yeah,
high functioning anxiety, and the 3 stages, where the first one is very much you're in the environment, you're doing this stuff, but you're disconnected to your body. And then that almost swaps to that place of you're so in your body, you can't handle the environment. And I was explaining that earlier on with my microtraumas and wanting to sit on the mountain and be a part. And I think it's that bit at that point that I think we get dragged into. That's where enlightenment will come. And that might not be a widespread understanding for everybody else, but that certainly was for me. That the only way I was going to get enlightenment was if I fuck my job off and go and live on a mountain for 6 years or something, and just sit there and go and do the thing. And now I understand in the journey of how we've been so far out in the world, then you have to go so far into your body, and then just to bring a bit of that yin and yang back to one another, so that I'm in this place now where I actually find certain I find life more interesting, even when there are ups and when there are downs. And we've got that that on its side infinity sign of going out into the world and coming back into me and out into the world. And that doesn't necessarily mean to say that sometimes they get out of kilter still, and that sometimes I'm going to be focused on the outside world, and sometimes I need to go back in here for a while and I enjoy a bit of just fucking the outside world off and stuff like that. I'm probably a little bit more sensitive to when that needs to occur, and I'll go and nourish that part. So I think that's why I wanted to ask about is, it's a pretty blunt question, is enlightenment a function of the nervous system? But, if I track my journey, and it was interesting because as I was starting to come out and see more complexity in the world and stuff, and 2020, 2021, I'd created enough space for me to go into, I'm not going to go too far into it now, but go into my own experience of boarding school and codependency. And if anybody looks at the podcast I did, particularly in 2020, they were flat out me. There wasn't just a hypothetical discussion. You go and look at that boarding school one, it's all my experience, it's all me, and it's as transparent as you get. Yet I was fine to do it and go there, because now I felt I had the existential trust and strength to be able to go into these deeper, darker places of shit that had occurred, and release that and let it go. And that boarding school podcast to this day still is highly watched, and I keep getting messages all the time about that. But so I guess for me, enlightenment is not being the bodhisattva on a tree, sitting under a tree or on a mountain or something like that. It's actually being here in the grind and dirt of being alive.
Yeah. So what I'd like to share with you, a word that I prefer to enlightenment, I mean, not to discount enlightenment and that end destination and that sort of, where we all want to be, is the word I prefer is enlightened darkenment, which is basically, it's enlightened darkenment.
Enlightened Argument.
So it's, I remember someone telling me this years ago to explain, and that came out of when I had this Vipassana and my body moving experience of just this sense of going, you know what, here I am. I'm part light. Part of me's healed, part of me's not healed. So someone said to me this once, I can't remember. They said, what does the word guru mean? And if you ask a Westerner, often will say, well, a guru is, the Indian guru. It's like someone you follow, a teacher, all of those sort of things. And then I used to always like to say to people, well, okay, what if I told you that the words gu and ru, the word guru is made up of two Sanskrit words, gu and ru, for light and dark. And the answer that people often say is, oh, well, the guru, what it means is it's someone who takes you from the dark to the light. And then I always like to make a joke. I say, no, that's not a guru. That's a from gu to ru. So the guru, that concept is the idea of the light and dark at the same time. Put it in English, just say enlightened darkenment, which means part of me is wonderful and loving and kind and blissful, and part of me is, broken and hurtful and mean. And so, again, not to discount the destination, but for me, it gives me, and this is part of what tremoring's got to me, is that sense of, we're calling it existential acceptance, or I'm saying enlightened darkenment, or in a guru state, there's that sense of, it's like the scales of life. Part of me's this and part of me's that, and I'm heading more in the direction of more light and less dark and all of that. But right here, right now, in order to start moving in that direction, I need to be able to be embodied in both of those things. Yes. Whereas most of us try and hide the shadow from ourselves, hide the darkness, behave a certain way. I always remember as a child, I was brought up the family was Catholic, and it was all about, love Jesus, love this, love one another, love. And I remember saying to my mum one time, I said, but Mum, what do I do if I don't love people? What do I do if I actually hate someone?
Yeah.
Well, you just love them. It's like telling someone to not be scared or not be angry. It never made sense. So anyway, so for me, there's that thing when I hear people talk about enlightenment, for me, I always kind of go, well, you know what? What if we all started aiming for enlightened darkenment, which was to come into the present moment here and be able to sit here like, the scales of life, that reflects us without judging it and saying, oh, I'm a terrible person, I'm a good person. It's just like, I'm a product of my history, my parents, my environment, everything. I'm a product of that. I've got some good and bad. And this is the thing for me, that direction that the tremoring, or again, it's not even the tremoring, the direction that my body, when I let it have its way with me, when I let it be free to move and express, the direction it's moving me towards is into more light and less dark, to put it in those, again, that's a very conceptual Western light's better than the dark, whereas it could be the other way around. But so it's having that sense of, right, well, but here I am. And you know what? If we could all choose enlightenment, we would. But we can't, or it seems at this point we can't, because otherwise we'd all do it. So we don't have an opportunity apart from to be where we are in the reality of our physiology. And when we see that our physiology is supporting that growth and that movement towards becoming more alive or more compassionate or more grounded or more mature and loving, then it's just a no-brainer to say, great, let's keep letting the body have that time and that space to, and this is what, it does come back to your question about is enlightenment in the nervous system, is for me, because what I experience myself when I talk about you being more alive, what we're hearing is more maturity. But it's not just maturity in our behavior, it's maturity in our nervous system or in our physiology. It's less reactive, it could be more reactive, but it's coming more out of defense. It's more grounded. It's got more capacity to stay calm and relaxed, or be grounded, or see the mystery of both sides rather than getting into fight and flight and you versus me. So there's a physiological maturity. And that for me is one of the magic things of using this tremor mechanism, because in utero, our body, we're not there. We're not thinking about it. It's got nothing to do with our cognition. Our nervous system is growing itself and getting itself to be more mature and more organized. And when we allow that process to continue outside the womb, the same thing happens. Our nervous system is growing. Again, it's a shitty word to use. It's a very limited word. It's more than our organism, but let's just use nervous system because that's what we all talk about at the moment. It's becoming more mature, and it's biological or neurophysiological maturity, which then makes it capable for us to have more mature thinking and to have more mature behavior and have more mature relationships, or, you know, and to be more
deal with unknown,
to deal with the mystery,
deal
the
with
total
unknown,
mystery of
open up to possibility and probability.
Yep.
And, you know, I'm quite triggered at the moment, or resonate around this concept of back to normal, safety, risk, and maintaining stable systems. You know, which the economy is, that's what it seeks to do. Manage risk, to say the same.
Yeah.
You know, make things safe for people and stuff like that. But in doing that, you're not, you know, you're constraining growth of life. And, you know, by pursuing, you know, tremoring and other things, and paying attention to a nervous system and how it responds, as well as the backlog of stuff that I may not have paid attention to, and things like that, means that I can be, you know, existentially all right when I have to sit down and contemplate what else there could be, or better ways of doing things. And yeah, you know, I mean, it's interesting, you know, you talk about, you know, we can talk about, you know, does the capitalist system work for us, you know, and often my response to that is, why do you want to be a communist instead? And it's like, no. There can be something else. We just need to think about that, and open up the possibility and probability for that to emerge. Now, that might mean we have to give up a lot of stuff that we've got now. Okay, which might mean that I might be sad because I'm going to have to give some shit up and ways of life, but then it might take us to somewhere else. So, you know, with every you know, new great thing that comes into my life, there's going to be a sense of loss. And with a sense of loss, you're going to have a sense of despair and unhappiness and sadness, even if it's fleeting, or it could be for a period of time. And it's okay to feel despair and dismay and these things with the world, because that means that you are in sync with it, and you're alive. And so you are a conduit for life. So this has been quite a conversation. It's been fucking awesome, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, what are we, about 7 hours? How long were we going?
About an hour and a half or something. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing I wanted to cover was, there is still a sense of, you probably might want to talk to this, there's still a sense of, I can't escape it, a sense of sadness that more don't pick up a very simple tool, or other tools, or just, but that force them to pay attention to the role of something that's going on physiologically in their body. Because, you know, I obviously, anybody who's hung on in this discussion to this point in time will see what it's done for one individual and yourself. But then you just like multiply that by 100,000, 10,000, 100,000, and then you start going, wow, this could be fucking awesome. So there's still a sense of sadness that I may be in the pattern of time at this point in time where that's not there. And I'm still about when there's more of that about. So, you know, I'm sort of grateful and sad in equal measures. And I'm all right with that.
Yeah, oh, totally. It's like, here we are. You know, I relate to that. And again, I just through experience, you know, I see that, you know, like watching an individual human body or organism tremor and move and shake itself towards vitality and aliveness and let go of stuff, and the patterns and how I see that happening on that microcosm scale are exactly the same as how I see it on a global scale. If you just look at the, you know, the earth as an organism and you see it spreading. So when we lie down and surrender and we allow our body to lead us, you know what, this part of the body moves, this other part doesn't. We'd all love we'd love to all be physiologically enlightened, so everything movement is just pure orgasmic bliss. But you know what? The body's just going to do it in its own way, in its own time. Now, we can help it. We can use positions or stop and start or take a break or go and see a facilitator, so we can support that process. But at the end of the day, you know, we can force parts of the body to tremor. but it generally doesn't work, and it doesn't hold, or it goes back to where it was anyway, and it creates a whole shitstorm. So I suppose what I'm saying is, and it's a hard, for me, mine's more not sadness. My pattern tends to be frustration and just pent up energy of like, just fuck, everyone would just fucking get this. You learn it, fucking just do it, experience it, see, get it. And people get it. Like, it's the thing, people, you'll see that moment where they go, I get it. I can't understand it, but I get it. I know this is doing something. It's moving me in the right direction. So I suppose, again, I totally relate to that. Is as my nervous system is getting a bit more relaxed and a bit more grounded, I have less of that pent up frustration of wanting to grab everyone and, shake the especially like the medical community in the Western world, and just to make it happen. And I'm surrendering in my older age and a bit more, of going, I'm still doing as much as I possibly can. But in the same way, when we're working with the body, it's not my job to try and make the tremor where I think it needs to go. I'm here to kind of be in service and support of it and help it as much as possible. And so, again, in the same way that I see, as we keep allowing the body to move, it organically moves itself towards wholeness, or whatever you want to say. I find it easier and easier to go, you know what, it's okay. It's okay where we're at. It's heading in the right direction. It's not up to me. And inadvertently, it actually makes me more effective and efficient, because I'm not in my fight mode of going, I've got to change how things are.
Yes.
There's that natural surrender, and same as facilitating TRE. And David Baselli always talks about, when he works with people, and it's amazing because he's worked with, I don't know, it might be 30,000 people or more tremoring in like hands-on one. It's just incredible. He says, look, I just try and let my organism respond to their organism, not my mind or my ego. And so the more, we get out of the way and we just allow our nervous systems or bodies to resonate in support, the more effective we are. So it's the same thing with, feeling that sadness and being human and allowing that to move, and it creates the movement of tears and breath and a bit more depth. And then in the next moment, we're ready to, take the next opportunity and keep moving forward. So, I have a deep sense in me of no matter what I can sort of help facilitate or open up or spread or share, that eventually when I die, I'll go, I'm irrelevant, really, and I'm almost irrelevant in the whole process. It's going to keep going. It's going to spread. And I'd love to take that, again, it's like a very traditional Native American practice, look 7 generations forwards, is, I love to be able to look, in 100 years after I've died, how's it all going to look? I go, I've got no idea, but I know it's not going to stop. It's not going to, life is going to keep going. It's going to keep growing and evolving. So, even just being able to be comfortable with that starts to go, right, well, here we are. We're on the bloody roller coaster. Let's try and enjoy it instead of, let's try enjoy it and embrace it and support it and make it a vital life experience, rather than, I've got to make it happen. But I get you. It's because once you experience it, like you know the value.
Yes.
For you now, maybe other people it's not going to work. I don't know, but when people get interested, you see enough people to go, when they get it and they keep doing it, they go on this journey. It can be a rocky road, but it can be, you use the weather analogy. There's storms, but there's also beautiful, blissful days. There's, perfect waves and stillness. There's all of those things happen. So, that's part of what's motivating us to be sitting here, sharing this conversation, is hopefully through just our presence and sharing of our journey and our experience of other people's journey, that people whose bodies and organisms and spirits are ready to embrace it, just get to take that next step and, dive into it.
Awesome. Well, here in Western Australia, we've now got a political precedence of mandating things that are good for you. Who knows? Richmond, has been awesome. Thank you very much for helping me navigate this, because as hopefully anyone who's hung in this long will realise, it is subtle, it is nuanced, it is different and difficult. Hopefully anybody that's, like I said at the start, anybody who's not encountered tremoring would now get an idea of it's not just turning up at a course, but it's a bigger journey. And anybody who's in their tremor journey, who's trying to make sense of it, hopefully there's things in my journey that help them to, you know, put their arms around what's actually happening for them and give them an idea. Probably to like legitimize and validify what's actually happening for them, because that's one of the difficult things. Is this really happening? Is this like, because I'm tinkering with the operating system, is this really what's happening? So yeah, I think with the notes for this, I'll put the link to the high anxiety functioning video, and I'll also put a link to your introductory course. Is there anything else you want to add?
Oh no, I just think you're doing great. I'm doing great. We're doing great. We've got a long way to go, so just keep going. You know,
Indeed.
like I think it's great, and hopefully, if people feel inspired, then you know to give it a go. And if you're having any difficulty, go and see someone who can help you make it work for yourself. Because you know, one of the key things. One of the key things for me is, you know, TRE is like a pathway to the thing. TRE is not the thing. The thing is that our organism has this impulse for life, and we can work out how to help support it and use it. So, it's not really a modality. You know, the effect of what's happening in TRE is not TRE or the technique. It's your organism and your body doing it. So, it's an innate process in mammals and in humans. So, if you're having trouble with it, it's not because the technique's wrong or bad, you know, or it's something wrong or it doesn't work. This isn't something that's been made up out of the blue. This has evolved in us all for, you know, millions of years. So if you're struggling with it, just find a TRE provider, or, you know, who can help you and help you make it work for you. That's probably the main thing.
And check back in with that provider. That's one of the key things for me, going back and seeing Fran and talking about it, and her watching me and suggesting new things.
Every time you get your car serviced.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Might be a nice reminder.
Yeah.
Just to go and get another set of
our nervous system all at the same time. Put a little sticker.
Yeah, that's it. Underneath the one, you know, 6 kilometres, 6 months or 12,000 kilometres.
6 months or 12 kilometres.
Go and see me. Go and do a session. Now, it might not be TRE, it could be someone else, but you know, we certainly don't tend to look after our bodies and ourselves as well as we look after our cars.
Indeed. Richmonds, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks, mate.
Cheers.